So diving into the actual training portion of this free series, I wanted to teach you things that I'd be teaching you if we were to be training together, if you were to be a client, and things that are just going to help you understand training more so that you can do more damage when you train and therefore build more muscle. You can go and download Chris Bumstead's workout plan or Arnold Schwarzenegger's workout plan, and the actual plan itself may be better than what you're doing now, but the number one thing that really makes that training plan effective is how it's actually executed. Things like tempo, mind-muscle connection, time under tension, the training intensity, and just how they're actually performing the lifts. That is the difference between just going to the gym and training and doing some serious damage and growing muscle. Understanding the actual fundamentals of why we build muscle is gonna help you grow better. So the reason why our body builds more muscle is because we give it this new stress via a new exercise or a new set scheme or a new amount of weight, and you're pushing your body to failure and causing this muscle damage, in which its response is to build back bigger and stronger than before. So when I speak to people and they come on board for coaching, the typical thing is they've hit a bit of a plateau with their actual growth and muscle gain. And when you look at their training plan, it's kind of stayed exactly the same with the same intensity for a while now. And that's the exact reason why their body has stopped building more muscle. So just understanding that the body's response to muscle damage is to build back bigger and stronger is going to allow you to understand why we build muscle in the first place. So this is where the whole progressive training plans or progressive overload comes into it, where every week you're doing more and more and more damage than you did the week before. Now, the easiest way to implement this is to just increase the weight. Obviously, when you first walked in the gym, you might only be able to lift a 20 kilo dumbbell, but eventually you get stronger and that goes to 22.5 and 25 and 27.5. But eventually you kind of stop pushing yourself, or maybe looking at your nutrition, you're not giving yourself enough calories or protein in order to actually fuel that growth. So when it comes to a progression-based training plan, all that means, and this is what I do for my clients, is that every week your total volume lifted at the end of the session, which is a calculation of the weight lifted for the total amount of reps, for the total amount of sets, for every exercise, that total volume lifted per session just needs to be slightly increasing every week. And you can do that by either increasing the weight, adding a set, adding a drop set, changing around the actual exercises or the set schemes to make sure that at the end of every session, you've trained to failure, you've done some serious fucking muscle damage, but that total volume lifted has increased. If you're doing that, then your body has to grow as a response. If you're doing damage to your muscles continuously and you're giving your body what it needs through nutrition, then your body has to grow in order to deal with that stress. So if you have plateaued with your training, maybe you do need to look at how you're actually training, your training intensity, your tempo, but also looking at that progressive overload and making sure every session you're either lifting more weight, you're doing more damage, your total volume lifted per session is going up. And that is why my clients get guaranteed results. If I put them on a progression-based training plan and I make sure that their nutrition is exactly where it needs to be week in, week out, then they're going to get the results they want. Now, this may be a little bit sciencey, but I guarantee it's going to help. When you contract your muscle, all your little muscle fibers, when they're not contracting, they're like this. And when they're contracting, they're more intertwined. And that is why, taking the bicep, for example, when it's lengthened, it looks quite small. And when it's contract, it becomes much bigger. Same with any muscle. When it's contract, it gets much bigger. And that is just because when you contract your muscle fibers intertwine. So when you squeeze your muscle, it's doing a bit of damage to those muscle fibers. But when you slowly lower the weight, it's doing more and more micro tears than if you were to just lift the weight up, put it down, lift it up, put it down. But if you were to implement an actual tempo into your training, then your results are gonna skyrocket and you're gonna be able to break through any kind of plateau that you're currently facing. So a tempo is just the timing of the actual lift. Let's take barbell curls, for example. You see a lot of people just 1 second up, 1 second down, 1 second up, 1 second down. Whereas you wanna be implementing a 1, 2, 3 tempo. It works with any exercise, and it just means that when you lift the weight up, that's the 1 second portion. You squeeze and contract the muscle for 2 seconds, and you slowly lower the weight for 3 seconds. Like I said, if you look at an actual muscle, when you contract, the muscle fibers intertwine. When you squeeze, that's going to be doing damage. But what does the most amount of damage and the most amount of micro tears is when you keep tension on the muscle, but you slowly lower the weight and tear these muscle fibers apart. So when you're training, you want to be slowly lowering the weight, whether it's leg extensions, bicep curls, chest press, anything where you can control the eccentric part of the lift, the lowering part of the lift, you're going to be doing much more damage. So first thing, follow a fucking tempo. Number 2 is your mind-muscle connection and your actual focus when you're training. Instead of going from home to work to the gym and it's just all one chaotic blur, try and set an intention before you go and train. Try and use that hour or hour and a half as a bit of a sanctity away from everything, where you can switch off from the outside world and solely focus on your actual muscles. If you're focusing on your actual muscles and you're focusing on your contractions and your squeezes, and when you're slowly lowering the weight, you literally imagine all these little micro tears taking place. Because the actual focus is there and the mind muscle connection is there, I guarantee you're going to be doing more damage. So when you hear people talking about mind muscle connection, and maybe you're a newbie that doesn't have a strong mind muscle connection, the more you build it up and the more you can focus on the actual muscle that you're training, the better your training intensity is going to be and the more muscle damage you're going to be doing. Whether you're gaining muscle or losing fat is really dependent on your actual calories and your macros, and we will get into that on the nutrition one. However, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to build muscle, just remember to actually switch on, have that mind-muscle connection, implement a tempo into your training. And when you're actually doing your reps, don't just throw the weights around, don't just drop and lose the tension instantly. Keep that tension on the muscle and slowly lower the weight, focusing on doing more damage. Now, when I work with a client, I write them up these training plans that are progression-based training plans, meaning that every week is a progression from the last week, and we're consistently doing more damage than we did last week, and we're just consistently doing more and more and more muscle damage. And what I do is give them a rep range. And I tell them that if it's a 6 to 8 rep range, I want them lifting a weight heavy enough that they're reaching actual muscle failure within that given rep range. And I'm sure you've seen rep ranges before and people talking about 12 to 15 or 8 to 10 rep range or 6 to 8 rep range. The main thing that you need to focus there is training to failure. And this is the training intensity portion. This is the training to failure portion. But if it says 6 to 8 reps and you just stop at 7, even though you could have got another 2 or 3 reps, but because it kind of hurt and because the rep range said 6 to 8 and it was kind of burning, you're leaving some muscle gain on the table and you're robbing yourself of actual progression. When I give someone a 6 to 8 rep range, I want them literally reaching failure within 6 to 8 reps. If they get 9, 10, the weight's too light. So that's how you really want to be judging how heavy you should be lifting based on that actual rep range. But this whole thing about not training to failure or stopping 2 reps before failure, if you've got someone that has a very low pain threshold and someone that has a very high pain threshold, the guy that's a little bit of a bitch is probably going to give up a lot sooner than the guy with the high pain threshold. So they're going to have 2 very different ideas of what stopping 2 reps before failure is. So by training to failure and having some fucking savage intensity with your training, you eliminate all of that guesswork. Now, there is a big difference between writing out a bunch of exercises and just going and doing them versus an actual progression-based training plan, where every week your total volume lifted slowly increases week by week to make sure that you're always forcing your body to grow. However, you could take the most simple basic Google search result kind of training plan and implement the tempo, the training intensity, the mind muscle connection, and your training is going to go from here to up here. Now, with my clients, I've got videos that actually teach them this in a lot more depth. If they've added on the actual video training series, then there's a bunch of videos on training, nutrition, and supplementation that goes in a lot more depth, exactly what we've just talked about. And it's what I'd teach someone if I was physically one-on-one coaching them in the gym. However, it's all just packaged in a way that I can teach you right here. So the next video is going to be on nutrition and calories and macros and how important that side of it is. But remember, when you're at the gym, train with intensity. Have that mind-muscle connection, train to failure. If you're not implementing a tempo, implement a fucking tempo. And remember, the only reason why your body builds more muscle is because you're forcing it to through muscle damage, which only ever occurs if you train to failure. So I do hope that helps you understand your training a little bit more. Implement what you've learned here. Let me know how you go with it all. And if you do see improvements with your training, I'll put my Instagram down in the description below. Feel free to shoot me a message and let me know how you've gone. I'll see you in the next one.